So I've worked on several pieces of writing, even books. I've done books on C++, or I've worked on a book on C++, worked on a book on C Sharp and that kind of thing. And when we're doing those books, we review and we review and we edit and we review. And when we actually publish the piece of work, it sounds like we're just so intelligent and we never make mistakes. And if we do, they're very few and far between, and chances are you won't catch them anyways. But when you're lecturing on video, well, it's pretty apparent. There's lots of mistakes. Now I could go back and edit and re-record and edit and re-record, but if I learned anything from re-recording is that I make other mistakes, and it just never ends. So I think it's probably a more, I don't know, educational, beneficial experience for me and you to see, hey, this is how I think, this is how I work through problems, this is how I make quality software. It just doesn't roll off the tip of my tongue. All right, I back myself up with the unit tests and catch myself, that kind of thing. But obviously I make a lot of mistakes as I'm going along. One thing I noticed between videos here is, remember we made this array up here so that I could say category 1, category 2, category 3, and I could change these categories all I want to, and those changes will naturally cascade throughout all the code. Well, that's good when you actually use it. You notice I failed to use it. I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed. I made this array and I failed to use it. All right, allow me to repent. Maybe I should go back to writing books. I don't know. Writing books is arduous. It takes a lot of work to do it right. It looks like it's so easily done, and it's not. So whatever. Num categories. This is even more exhausting to do videos, but I think it's useful, and I think you can communicate a lot more. Like a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video's worth 1,000,000,000 kind of thing. So whatever. Categories sub I. Now ideally my tests are passing and I can verify that change works. But unfortunately our tests aren't passing, and I'm proactively doing something I probably shouldn't be doing until the tests are passing again. But I'm not perfect, and I'm going to do it. Or I did it. Oh, don't tell me. Okay, look, we're trying to get this test to go, this circulating 1 plus sum, and I'm actually going to bump it up to 3. So I want, actually, offline, I came up with this. Here's the profile samples we're going to go through. And the end result that we should get out to the file in this case, we know we're doing 5 frames. So here's 1 frame, 2 frames, 3 frames, 4 frames, 5 frames. So the end result file should look like this. All right, let me give this more separation. This should be the profiles.csv file contents here. But this is actually what we're going through. These are the actual numbers we are working through when we do our actual test here. I'm saying let's go plus 3 frames. All right. Well, so what number should we start out at? Well, we should start out at 9. Well, how do we calculate that number? All right, we need a way to. Our test should start at 9 and check for 10, 11, 12, and so on and so forth. Right now, if I look at, let's see, what is it? Check frames. We're doing I. All right, we say I get 0, I less than num frames times num's categories. The tests are not written to account for the wraparound that we're going to do with the profiler, and so I always starts at 0. But in this case, I should start at 9. What should we do? Well, I think I'm going to change this up and be a little bit more explicit. We know the categories will not change. So let's do let's do this unsigned int. We'll call this profile number. And I'm going to assume that we're not going to wrap. All right, which obviously is not the case with this data here. Let's assume we don't wrap. But now we need to check if we did wrap. All right. Well, how can we tell if we wrapped? Pause the video. Think about it. Here's all the frames we wrote out in this test. How can we detect whether we wrapped or not? And by wrapped, I mean we went through and then we wrapped back around the beginning here. How can we tell that? Pause the video and think about it. Okay. We have num frames, right? That gives us 8 in this case, right? And I know I should just say num frames, but I'm working with some real numbers here. So num frames is 8, and then num frames, in order to wrap, it has to go past the maximum amount of frames that we can store, which are reduced to 5 for debugging purposes currently. So So where is that number stored? Well, remember we made it public over here, this max frame samples, and we made it public just so we can do some testing with it. I'm still not sure how I feel about that. So I can say if num frames is greater than profiler max frame samples, and actually it's greater than or equal to. Okay, remember num frames, we're going up. If max frame samples is 5, then this is frame 0, frame 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're counting 0 to 4. Well, to go past that, to go inclusive, we have to include the max frames. So that's what the equals for. We're going on the other side here. We're saying if num frames is past the highest zero-based count that I can store or equal to it, then we know that we've wrapped. So then, profile number should not be 0. Let's in that case it should be, let's see, 9, right? It should be 9. Well, how do we calculate 9? Well, let me do some drawing here. We have our maximum number of frames that we can store. We have our total number of frames. Okay, this is 8. Right, and the maximum we can store is 5. So how do we get 9? Oh, and it's also important to note that we have a number of categories that we're storing. In this case, it's 3. Right, so using these numbers, how can I get a 9? Right, pause the video, think about that. Okay, I hope you were able to work that out on paper. Basically, we're taking our number of frames that we tested. We're going to subtract the number of frames we can store. Alright, and 8 minus 5, that will return a 3 in this case. Okay, so that essentially gives us the leftover frames here. This is the 3 leftover frames. Well, that's good. Now how can I turn that into a 9? Well, we have 3 items per frame that we ditched. Okay, this is like the number of ditched frames, right? And we know that we have 3 items per frame that we ditched, and conveniently they're 0 based. So all I need to do there is multiply that result by the number of categories that we have. So then 3, this 3, 8 minus 5, 3 times this 3, that gives us a 3, will equal 9, which is the target number that we're going for in this case. Well, what are these variables called? This red variable, let me get the red again. The red is the num frames, this test. Okay, the 5 is the max frames we can store, and the green 3 here is the number of categories. That's an N, right? Number of categories. So all we need to do is tweak our code to do just that. Let me I'm going to erase this off here and keep this here for reference. Erase all this off and go back to our code. And our profile number will be num frames times profiler dot max frames, or not time. Did I say times? Sorry, minus here. I'm looking around. I need to get the minus here. Times the number of categories that we have. So num categories. All right, that will stick our profile number right where we want it. And then when we check here, we just want to say profile number plus plus. All right, does that make sense? So it will go 9, 10, 11, 12, 9, come on. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All right, that's what we're doing here, and that's quite convenient, I think. And I think is there anything else we need to do? I'm just looking at here, pondering for a minute. Looks like I think we're probably pretty good. So next video. Well, first of all, we're just tweaking the test. All right. Right now, I'm feeling pretty good that our tests. This will satisfy our testing condition. It will start out where it needs to and go on up, and then we make sure that we're at the end of the file. So I'm feeling pretty good about the test. Now the next thing we need to do is verify that this test fails, which it should, because we haven't tweaked the profiler yet. We need to go tweak the profiler code to actually account for our wrapping and write the values out in the correct order. So we'll work towards that in the next video.